The tension in the room was palpable.
3 years ago, that night, you forced yourself on me. You were drunk and mistook me for Sarah. Desperate.
Is that so? The reporters showed up the next morning. Don't tell me that was a coincidence. Grabbing her wrist.
I really didn't know. For 3 years, have you ever treated me as your wife?
Even the most heartless person should be moved by her unwavering devotion over these 3 years.
Wife? Humph, to me, you're just someone to vent my frustrations on, a bed warmer, merely wearing the title of Mrs. James. Pinching her face.
Do you think you have the right to mention Sarah's name? You pushed her into the sea, and she was never found. How dare you still deny it?
I didn't push Sarah into the sea.
She had explained this countless times. Over the past 3 years, it had been a thorn in her heart.
Not you? Ha! Emily, to climb up to me, there's nothing you wouldn't do. Flinging her face away and storming out.
In the mirror, a delicate face with exquisite features, a beauty that should have been stunning, was overshadowed by pale lips and a weary expression.
Emily, these 3 years, did marrying him really fulfill your wishes?
Tears flowed again, and the bathroom echoed with her soft, sorrowful sobs. From the beginning, she should never have foolishly clung to James. Perhaps they wouldn't have ended up like this. She made a silent decision in her heart. Night fell, and James returned to the villa late at night.
Emily, you've grown bold enough to ask for a divorce. Holding the signed papers. Starting tomorrow, you'll work at the company as a design assistant. If you dare to run away, I'll make sure your family suffers.
James looked down at the woman lying on the sofa, let out a cold snort, and went upstairs.
Mistress, hurry to help her up.
Martha, I'm fine. Having a job is a good thing. It's better than staring blankly at home every day. Forcing a smile through her tears.
The next morning, Emily took a taxi to the company. Holding a few design books, she stood in front of the towering building, the sunlight reflecting off the glass, making it almost blinding. She stared unblinkingly at the top floor. Emily frowned as she entered the company.
Are you Mrs. James? This is your desk. You're my assistant. I'm Jessica. I'll call you if I need anything. Introducing herself.
The conference room was filled with design department staff, and as a design assistant, Emily followed them in. Emily handed out printed design drafts to everyone.
Mr. Charles, please have a seat.
The man sat down. It was none other than Charles, the renowned president of a famous architectural design company. Emily's eyes widened in surprise.
Mr. Charles, these are the design drafts from our department. Pushing the drafts forward.
Charles picked them up and began to review them seriously.
Vulgar shallow, tossing the drafts back onto the table. James, I've heard your company is a top-tier firm in the country. Are you testing my willingness to cooperate with these subpar drafts?
Mr. Charles, you're overthinking. These are just preliminary drafts. In 3 days, I promise to present you with a satisfactory architectural design. Closing the drafts.
Well, I have high hopes for you. I'll return in 3 days. Patting James on the shoulder.
Charles left, leaving James in deep thought. Charles picked up the drafts and began to review them seriously.
Vulgar shallow.
Charles tossed the drafts back onto the table as if discarding trash.
James, I've heard your company is a top-tier firm in the country. Are you testing my willingness to cooperate with these subpar drafts?
Charles turned to James, a hint of displeasure in his eyes.
Mr. Charles, you're overthinking. These are just preliminary drafts. In 3 days, I promise to present you with a satisfactory architectural design.
James closed the drafts and spoke in a low voice.
Well, I have high hopes for you. I'll return in 3 days.
Charles patted James on the shoulder before leaving. It was just past 7 in the morning, and it was pouring rain outside. Emily climbed out of bed. Emily opened the door, and just then, the main door swung open. She looked up to see a woman in a white dress with a high ponytail standing downstairs.
Sarah!
With trembling fingers, she pointed at the smiling woman not far away.
Long time no see, Emily.
Emily clutched the stair railing, trying to stand up, her eyes red with shock.
You weren't supposed to be here. Why are you still?
Gone? As long as James is here, how could I be gone?
Sarah grabbed Emily's collar and pulled her forward.
Then why did you accuse me of pushing you into the sea back then? You jumped yourself.
Emily suppressed her fear and growled.
Emily, it's been 3 years, and you're still so naive.
I treated you as my best friend, and you treated me so cruelly.
Emily cried, clutching her head.
Why? Because I despise spoiled, naive girls like you. I want to ruin you.
Sarah yanked Emily's hair, forcing her to look into her eyes, her gaze filled with malice.
Fine. If you didn't succeed in the sea, I'll finish it today. You can go away.
Just as Emily was choking Sarah, a powerful force threw her to the cold ground, causing her to shudder in pain. She turned to see the scene she had feared most in her life. James's face showed an expression of sorrow and longing she had never seen before.
James, how have you been these years?
Not well at all. I've missed you so much. Never leave me again.
Okay, I'll never leave you again.
Sarah then turned to Emily with a cold, triumphant smile. Emily stumbled out of the house, the rain soaking her to the bone, the cold water adding to her physical and emotional pain. The man behind her held the woman he cherished, not looking back as they went upstairs. Emily ran aimlessly in the rain, crying her heart out, when a sports car stopped beside her, and a man got out.
Emily? What happened to you?
Emily, lost in her own world, ignored John. She felt an overwhelming fatigue and a splitting headache before finally collapsing. On the hospital bed, Emily breathed heavily, as if having a nightmare. She struggled to sit up, her head throbbing.
John, why are you here?
I found you by the roadside.
Only then did Emily realize she was in a hospital room, with an IV in her hand.
Thank you. I must have looked terrible.
Yes, you did. But you're lucky you're pretty, or you would have looked really awful.
John joked with a serious face, stroking his chin. Emily was amused by John's words, managing a tired smile that looked more like a grimace. Since that day, Sarah had been staying at the James residence for 5 days. During these 5 days, Emily experienced an unexpected calm. James did not retaliate against her, and Sarah did not make things difficult for her. Everything was so peaceful that it made her uneasy. She continued to go to work and return home as usual, fully immersing herself in her work. That night, Emily slept soundly, without any dreams. In the morning, she hurried out the door. Despite the unpleasant people at the company, she still had to go to work. After all, it was the only way to maintain control over the situation.
Hey, it seems like Mr. James isn't feeling well today.
Yes, I just delivered some documents and saw him clutching his stomach, looking quite pale.
Really? The invincible CEO actually gets sick.
A group of women gathered, gossiping. This rare moment made Emily look up from her drawing. She tightened her grip on the pen, hesitated for a moment, then stood up and walked out. When she returned to the company, she was holding a cup of hot milk and a box of stomach medicine. She stepped out of the elevator but paused at the door of the CEO's office. What she saw was Sarah's worried expression.
James, how's your stomach? I just bought this for you. Drink some.
The man sitting in the chair pulled Sarah into his arms, letting her lean against his chest.
Your presence is the best remedy.
The man's low, tired voice carried a hint of joy. This scene made Emily's heart ache, and she found it hard to breathe. She placed the milk by the door, lowered her head, and left.
James, am I pressing on your stomach?
No.
The man replied, his long fingers stroking the head resting in his arms.
Here, drink something warm to ease the pain,
Sarah said, placing a straw to the man's lips. The man took a sip but immediately frowned, his expression darkening.
I never drink soy milk.
His words made Sarah's hand pause, her face showing a moment of confusion.
Oh. Look at me, ever since that accident at sea, my memory has gotten worse. I even forgot what you like to drink,
Sarah said, lightly hitting her head in frustration.
But you've been so careless. I've only been gone for 3 years, and you've already worked yourself into a stomach problem.
Her words made the man's eyes flicker.
All right, now that I'm back, I'll make sure you eat on time. I should go now, or people at the company will start talking,
Sarah said, getting up from the man's arms and leaving the CEO's office. The room fell into a heavy silence. The man stared at the soy milk on the table, a trace of doubt in his eyes. His stomach issues had started 7 years ago. Back in school, Sarah used to bring him milk, knowing about his condition. Why did she seem completely unaware now? After returning from the CEO's office, Sarah had been frowning, her face looking troubled. What should she do? She seemed to have made a mistake. Emily hadn't told her it was milk back then, and she had always assumed it was soy milk. How could she be so foolish, doing something so uncertain? Moreover, with James's calm and sharp mind, did he notice something just now? If he really did, everything would come to light, and she would lose everything. No. She couldn't let that happen. Sarah stood up abruptly and walked out quickly.
Knock, knock. James, it's Sarah. Can I come in?
But there was no response from the CEO's office. Sarah knocked a few more times, still no response. What was going on? She entered the CEO's office with a sense of unease. James was nowhere to be seen. Her eyes suddenly caught sight of a stack of contracts in the drawer. She opened the drawer, took out the contracts, and as she read through them, Sarah's face lit up with delight. A cunning plan flashed in her eyes. She had found a way to completely remove Emily as an obstacle. She wrapped the documents in her coat and left the president's office.
A trip? The company is very busy right now, I'm afraid. We haven't spent quality time together since I came back. This time, you must accompany me to the US for 7 days, clutching the man's arm.
This sudden display of affection and persistence caused a flicker of impatience in the man's eyes.
James! Do you have feelings for Emily? Are you going to leave me? I should have seen this coming.
No, my feelings for you have never changed and never will. Stop crying, I'll go to the US with you.
But his intense reaction only served to reveal something.
You promised? Then we'll leave tomorrow, and you can't back out, lifting her tear-streaked face.
All right, get some rest tonight. He kissed her forehead and left the room.
Sarah watched his retreating figure, a look of resentment and unwillingness in her eyes. James had only been with her for 2 nights after she returned, and since then, he hadn't touched her. Sarah dialed a number. Be ready to act tomorrow afternoon, she said before hanging up. Sunlight streamed into the room, waking Emily with the ringing of her phone. Seeing it was her father calling, she answered.
Hello, Dad.
Emily, what's this termination contract about? Did you upset James? Our family is relying on the James family right now.
What termination contract?
Just now, a termination contract between our family and the James family arrived home with James's signature on it. You need to bring James home immediately.
James, don't worry. I'll go ask him right now. She hung up, quickly got dressed, and rushed to the company, only to be told by the secretary that James had gone on a business trip.
Mr. James left early this morning with Miss Sarah for a week-long trip to the U.S.
The secretary's words hit Emily like a ton of bricks. Just as she was about to call James, her phone rang.
Emily, something terrible has happened. Your father had a stroke.
What? Mom, what are you saying?
Your father is paralyzed. He's at the Central City's Fukan Hospital. Come quickly.
The news drained the color from Emily's face. She ran out of the company, hailed a cab, and rushed to the hospital. After comforting her parents, she left the hospital in the early hours of the morning. That night felt like an eternity to her. She endured for more agonizing days in this turmoil. Now, she stood at the airport entrance. 2 cars were parked nearby, belonging to James and Sarah, as they were returning today. She stared at the airport entrance, standing still for a long time. Finally, the doors opened, and she saw them. Facing the man before her, Emily's appearance shocked him. Her dark circles were so heavy they were swollen.
Mr. James, please retract the termination contract with the Su Group. I'll agree to any conditions you have, no questions asked.
The hospital had informed her that her father's will to live was weakening, and his heart was starting to fail. She was at her wit's end and had no time to waste. James, increasingly confused, furrowed his brows. Termination contract? He had indeed printed a termination contract with the Su Group out of anger over her closeness with John, but he hadn't executed it. Why was she suddenly bringing this up? He was about to ask. The woman's phone rang. It was a call from the hospital. Emily's face turned pale, and she ran off in a panic, bumping into several pedestrians. James hurriedly chased after her. On the bridge, facing the sea, Emily stared blankly at the approaching James.
My parents are gone.
What happened, Emily? Come over here and explain it to me slowly.
Explain? You know better than anyone why they are gone, don't you?
Emily's tears fell uncontrollably.
I don't understand what you're saying. Come over and explain it to me slowly, okay?
James moved slowly towards Emily, his actions gentle, afraid to startle her as she stood on the edge.
Why did you do this to me? Why?
Emily's mind grew increasingly unclear, and she kept murmuring to herself with her head down. Just as James was about to reach Emily, Sarah, who had just caught up, grabbed his hand, clinging to him in fear. Emily suddenly found it laughable. Because she loved this man, she had ruined her entire life, caused the bankruptcy of the Su Corporation, and led to her parents' tragic demise. The more she thought about it, the more agitated she became. Emily suddenly burst into laughter, then abruptly broke into tears.
If I hadn't stubbornly loved you, my parents wouldn't have passed. If I had given up earlier, my life wouldn't be like this.
Her words made James frown more and more.
3 years of marriage, 5 years of love, I regret it.
She slowly raised her head, staring intently at the man in front of her. The face she had loved for 5 years now slowly mixed with a hint of hatred.
James, I don't want you anymore.
I don't agree.
Emily sneered coldly, pointing at the angry man opposite her.
If there's a next life, I will make sure you suffer endlessly.
With that, before the man could react, she leaned back and fell into the roaring sea.
Emily!
James! No!
Sarah quickly grabbed the man who wanted to jump after her.
Let go!
The man roared, pushing Sarah away in his frenzy.
James! I'm the one you love. Are you going to jump for Emily? Are you going to leave me behind?
Sarah held on to the man tightly, preventing him from jumping again. Her words made James freeze. He took out his phone and called the emergency services.
Someone jumped off Looting Bridge into the sea. Send a rescue team immediately. Now!
Soon, ambulances and boats arrived. They searched for 6 hours but found nothing.
Go back with the police car. I have some things to figure out.
James drove off in a hurry.
James!
Sarah watched the speeding car helplessly, but the thought of Emily being gone filled her with twisted excitement.
Emily, you deserved this.
Before Sarah could finish her sentence, the man grabbed her wrist, causing her pain.
James, you go,
Did you secretly send the contract to the Su family?
The man's dangerous question sent a chill down Sarah's spine.
James, what are you talking about? I don't understand. I've been with you in the US this whole time.
7 days ago, you entered my office wearing a coat and left with it in your hand. You were in there for less than 5 minutes. Did you feel hot in just over 4 minutes?
The man's increasingly stern voice and relentless questioning made Sarah feel scared.
I dropped something under the desk. The coat was too tight, so I took it off to bend down.
Sarah, I despise dishonesty. I believe fingerprints can still be checked.
James was clearly angered, his eyes dark with intensity.
Yes. I sent the contract to the Su family. I didn't expect Emily to take such drastic measures because of it.
Sarah fell to the ground, crying uncontrollably.
Why did you do it?
Because I was afraid you didn't love me anymore. I left for 3 years, and I felt so insecure. I was afraid of losing you.
Just because of that, you...
Yes. It's all my fault. It's my fault for loving you too much. If you think I caused Emily's tragedy, then I'll give my life to make up for it.
Sarah suddenly stood up and ran towards the wall, but was pulled back by a strong force. James stared at Sarah for a long time, finally relaxing his brow. He let go of her and left without saying a word. Sarah watched his departing figure, a cold smile forming on her lips. Now that Emily, the biggest threat to her, was gone, she had no more worries. But she didn't know that a greater disaster was waiting for her. The search team spent 3 days and nights at sea but found nothing. James also shut himself away from Sarah for 3 days and nights. In the morning, the study door creaked open.
James, you're finally out.
Sarah grabbed the man's hand, crying pitifully. But it didn't earn her any sympathy. He withdrew his hand and walked downstairs, with Sarah following closely behind. At the door, the man suddenly stopped.
Sarah, you've changed so much I don't recognize you anymore.
With that, he left without looking back, leaving Sarah in shock and panic. James didn't go to the company, but instead went to a university. He wandered around the campus slowly. He clearly remembered that there was always a bottle of milk and a capsule under the lecture table back then.
Hey, isn't that Mr. James from Guangshang Group? Oh my, it really is Mr. James. It's been over 3 years since I last saw you.
a middle-aged woman said with a smile.
Professor Grace, it's indeed been a long time.
This was Grace, the former class advisor of Sarah and Emily.
Yes, it's been a long time. Ever since Emily's class graduated, you haven't come to the school to give public lectures.
Grace sighed.
There have been many talented students in the recent classes. It's just that those kids didn't have the fortune.
Talented people can't be hidden anywhere.
That's true. Like Emily, she was the most talented design student I've ever taught. I still miss her to this day. Wasn't she the only intern who got to work at your company and even received a scholarship to study abroad? Mr. James, you must remember her.
Professor Grace, you must be mistaken. The design genius you're referring to is Sarah.
Impossible. I would never forget the name of such a talented student.
The Sarah you're talking about was the worst student in the class. How could you confuse her with Emily?
Grace's face froze in a smile, realizing she had let something slip.
Oh? My memory must be failing me. I was mistaken. It was Sarah, not Emily.
What do you mean by that?
Right? I have an important meeting to attend. I'll take my leave now and chat with you another time, James.
Grace glanced at her watch and hurriedly left. James pondered over everything Grace had just said, a deep sense of doubt welling up inside him.
What on earth is going on? Could there have been many things I was unaware of back then?
He took out his phone and dialed a number.
Investigate everything about Emily from the 15th class of Huaqiao Design Academy for me. Wait, also investigate Sarah. I need the information within 3 days.
3 days later, in his car.
James, here is the information you requested.
A man handed a stack of documents to James, who took them and waved the man away. He opened the file with Emily's name on it, which contained all her school designs and grades, all of which were excellent. The more he read, the more turbulent his emotions became.
October 2014, she purchased 300 boxes of stomach medicine.
His face grew darker, and unease began to rise within him. He then opened Sarah's file, which was filled with unsavory terms like nightclubs and one-night stands. James's grip on the documents tightened, crumpling them into a ball.
What have I been doing all these years?
Guilt, anger, and hatred surged through him, causing his head to ache. He turned and opened the door.
James, you finally agreed to see,
Sarah, who had been about to express her joy, was startled by his sudden action.
Gee, James, what's wrong? I can't breathe.
Sarah was genuinely frightened, her trembling hands trying to pry off the strong grip on her neck, but it was like steel.
Did you impersonate her back in school? HM?
The man's deep, icy voice made her feel even more suffocated.
Yes, I slept with the principal a few times to have him switch everything from Emily to me.
James flung her away, and she hit the ground, her forehead striking the corner of the table, causing blood to flow. The man crouched down, gripping her jaw with a cold, piercing gaze.
Don't worry, I won't let you off so easily. You'll spend the rest of your life atoning for your sins.
The man before her resembled a demon from the depths of hell, making Sarah realize that the punishment awaiting her would be worse than anything she could imagine.
No! Please! James, I know I was wrong.
The man tightened his grip on her neck, stopping her frantic movements.
Wrong? Atonement begins when Emily returns.
He smiled, a bloodthirsty smile. She was terrified, to the point of suffocation. 3 years later. As night fell, another busy day came to an end. James strode out of the company, and the employees dared not move an inch as he passed. He sped all the way to a dilapidated building, where a brand-new, thick iron door starkly contrasted with the rundown structure. James raised his hand to input the door code, and the door opened. Inside was a shabby room, filled with an unbearable stench. In the dim light, a large iron cage could be seen, containing a woman.
I was wrong. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I beg you.
The woman immediately knelt and desperately begged for mercy upon seeing James.
You will atone for your actions for the rest of your life, along with the wrongdoings of your parents.
James squatted down to face the woman, who was barely recognizable. Yes, the filthy woman in the cage was Sarah. She had been tormented here for 3 years. In the United States, a luxurious, spacious hall was filled with reporters, who were whispering anxiously, seemingly waiting for someone important. Just as the reporters were engaged in heated discussions, a door on the side of the stage opened. A stunning woman in professional attire walked in, her high heels clicking on the floor. The crowd erupted in excitement, craning their necks to discuss.
Is this woman the world-renowned architectural designer? Could she really be so young?
The reporters bombarded her with inquiries. The woman on stage smiled calmly in response to the barrage of questions. She answered them one by one, maintaining her composure and grace, impressing everyone with her wisdom and poise. After the press conference ended, the woman walked back to where she had come from.
John, the time is right now, so I plan to return to my home country soon.
John's brow furrowed at her words.
After all these years, you still want to go back? Haven't I?
Haven't I made you feel anything for me at all? John thought, the words he had held back for 3 years.
Some things can't be forgotten with time. There are still matters I need to attend to there.
She had endured 3 years for this moment.
All right, I'll go with you. See you at the airport the day after tomorrow.
Thank you, John. I fear I can never repay the debt I owe you.
With that, she walked away without looking back, her high heels clicking on the floor. She wasn't heartless, she just didn't want to show too much sadness. Yes, this top designer who had made waves in the United States was none other than Emily. 3 years ago, she had attempted to end her life by jumping into the sea, but fate had other plans. She had clung to a piece of driftwood and was carried far away by the wind and waves, eventually being rescued by a passing ship. Perhaps the heavens pitied her for her miserable past, for John happened to be on that ship. And the ship was bound for the United States, where she was saved. 2 days later, the plane landed, and Emily stepped out of the cabin. When she reached the airport entrance, she froze. She would never forget this gate, not even in death. All the suffocating memories came rushing back, overwhelming her.
Emily, what's wrong?
Sensing something was amiss, John put his arm around her shoulder.
Nothing, just a bit tired.
You haven't found a place to stay since returning to China. Why not stay at my place for now?
No need. I bought back that house some time ago. I'll go there directly.
Emily subtly avoided John's arm.
All right then, see you at the company tomorrow. I've arranged everything, including the collaboration you mentioned.
Thank you, John. I'll head home now. See you at the company tomorrow.
Emily drove away. At Guangshang Group,
Mr. James, the top designer from Time Company in the US, has arrived downstairs.
All right.
James opened his tired eyes. He rubbed his temples and turned his chair to face the visitor. At that moment, he found it hard to distinguish between reality and a dream. Her face was identical to the one in the photo on his desk.
Hello, I'm Sophia, a designer from the US.
She said with a professional smile, her voice as clear as a spring. She was about to speak again when a muffled voice interrupted her.
Emily, I've missed you so much.
What does that have to do with me?
She laughed, unsure if she was mocking herself or fate.
Emily, I've thought about you every moment for the past 3 years. Please give me a chance to make amends.
He gently caressed her face with his long fingers. Slap. She unhesitatingly slapped his hand away.
If the Su family still existed, if my parents were still alive, I might consider it.
A cold smile never left her lips. Her words made him flinch slightly. She now radiated an undeniable brilliance.
It seems Mr. James isn't in the mood to discuss business today. Let's reschedule,
she said, picking up the documents on the table and turning to leave. Her figure overlapped with the memory of her jumping into the sea, and a deep-seated fear surged within James.
Wait. Sign it.
James grabbed the contract from her hand. He opened it and signed his name without reading a single word.
Mr. James, you're usually so cautious. This time, you didn't even look before signing?
As long as it's you, that's enough.
I have other matters to attend to at my company, so I'll take my leave,
she said, nodding slightly and turning to leave. As she did, she caught a glimpse of the photo on the desk. Her body stiffened momentarily before she resumed her stride and left. James stared at the closing door, suddenly grabbing his car keys and running out. She had returned, and this time he would not let her go, no matter the cost. By the time he reached outside, she was already gone. He watched the elevator numbers descend floor by floor and quickly ran into the stairwell, rushing down. When he reached the first floor, drenched in sweat, he saw the elevator still on the third floor and allowed himself a rare smile. Ding. As the elevator doors opened, he stood straight, hands in his pockets, looking serious.
Emily, what a coincidence. I was just heading out. Let me give you a ride.
Emily was too stunned to speak. She had taken the elevator first, so how did he get down faster?
Emily, let's go,
he said, grabbing her hand and leading her outside. He opened the car door and pushed Emily inside. Emily was taken aback. Over the years, this man's audacity had only grown. He got into the car, holding her wrist with one hand and locking the door with the other.
Mr. James, I'm not a criminal. Please let me out.
James swallowed hard.
Emily, do you really hate me so much that?
Yes! I hate you so much that I dream of you disappearing from my life.
James said nothing, just looked at her. They stared at each other for a long time, the car filled with an inexplicable tension. Time passed, and she could no longer bear to look into his eyes because in them. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the car window.
Emily, I'm here to pick you up. I figured you'd be hungry by now, so I came over. Let's go.
John continued, not sparing a glance at James.
My friend is here to pick me up. Please let me out, Mr. James,
she said, struggling to free herself from his grip. But the car started moving again.
Let me out! If you don't want me to despise you even more.
Her words made James flinch. Click. The car door unlocked, and Emily got out without hesitation.
I told you I'd come with you, but you wouldn't listen. You almost got into trouble, didn't you? He ruffled her hair with a hint of reproach in his voice.
The affection in John's eyes and the gesture made the man in the car want to go mad, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. He sped away without a moment's hesitation, unable to bear the scene but powerless to change it, as he couldn't afford to anger her further. Emily stared blankly at the departing James.
Emily?
Huh? Oh, let's go.
John's call brought Emily back to reality.
How did it go? Did he sign?
John opened the car door, shielding her with his hand.
He signed. She shook the contract in her hand with a smile.
You're getting closer to what you want.
Yeah.
After composing herself, Emily returned to the company with John and began a busy day at work. As night fell, Emily drove to a luxurious villa. She stared at the villa, her eyes filled with complex emotions. She got out of the car and rang the doorbell. The iron gate on the side slowly opened.
You? Are you really the young mistress?
I'm here to see Martha. Is she in?
She skipped the butler's question and asked with a smile. The butler hurriedly ran off, nearly tripping, still not fully recovered from the shock. In no time, a hurried figure came running from the house.
Young mistress, is it really you? You're alive? I knew it. Someone as good as you would surely be blessed. Thank heavens. Thank you for your protection. Thank heavens for your protection.
Emily quickly helped the tearful Martha, who was kneeling on the ground in gratitude.
Martha, there's no need for this. I'm fine now.
Emily felt a warm current in her heart, knowing that someone in this world still cared deeply about her well-being. Martha, wiping her tears, led Emily inside, crying and laughing all the way, clearly overwhelmed with emotion.
Young mistress, I'll go prepare a room for you and Mr. James. He'll be so happy to know you're alive. This way, Mr. James won't have to sleep in the servants' quarters anymore. Though he never said it, I could tell he missed you dearly these past 3 years. He always set a place for you at the table, and the house is filled with your photos. He even only wore the suits you used to iron. He hasn't bought a new suit in 3 years.
Martha busied herself in the living room, happily chattering away.
By the way, young mistress, you haven't eaten yet, have you? I'll make your favorite braised meatballs.
No need, Martha. I just came to see you.
Emily stopped her, smiling weakly.
You're not staying?
Martha's eyes reddened again. She had long considered Emily her daughter, and now that her daughter had just returned, she was already saying she had to leave.
Martha, I'll visit whenever I can, or you can come see me if you miss me. Here's my current address and phone number.
She handed Martha a note. She had also long considered Martha family, but some things, once changed, couldn't be undone.
You're really not coming back? Mr. James.
Between him and me, you should know the truth. Martha, come visit me often. I miss your cooking.
Martha's reluctance made Emily's nose tingle.
Young mistress.
Charles picked them up and began to review them seriously.
Vulgar shallow.
Charles tossed the drafts back onto the table as if discarding trash.
James, I've heard your company is a top-tier firm in the country. Are you testing my willingness to cooperate with these subpar drafts?
Charles turned to James, a hint of displeasure in his eyes.
Mr. Charles, you're overthinking. These are just preliminary drafts. In 3 days, I promise to present you with a satisfactory architectural design.
James closed the drafts and spoke in a low voice.
Well, I have high hopes for you. I'll return in 3 days.
Charles said, patting James on the shoulder before leaving. The police officer asked. The man, however, kept his gaze fixed on the woman sitting nearby, his dark eyes filled with deep emotion.
Yes.
Emily was stunned. She had thought he would use every means possible to defend his innocence. She had even prepared a team of lawyers. But he admitted it with just one word. Didn't he realize that this admission could lead to the downfall of the entire company? Everyone present was equally shocked. After speaking, the police officer signaled, and the man was taken away. The remaining people in the room were left with their own thoughts. In the following days, every TV channel broadcasted the news of the company's bankruptcy due to a severe theft incident. Her long-awaited revenge had been fulfilled. Wasn't this what she had dreamed of? But why? Why did her heart ache so much? The ringing phone jolted Emily out of her complex emotions. She answered the call and after a few words, hung up. Emily quickly got up and left the room.
John, what's wrong? Why did you call me so urgently?
Emily jogged to the roadside.
Emily, do you still love James?
John's sudden question left her momentarily stunned.
No.
She gritted her teeth as she spoke, but her face turned away.
Now that your revenge is complete, you should think about yourself, right?
John, what's wrong with you today? Why are you talking so strangely?
Emily, marry me.
John suddenly dropped to one knee, holding a ring box. The ring inside sparkled in the sunlight.
For years ago, I fell in love with you at first sight. For years later, that love remains unchanged. Emily, I've been with you through the painful past, and I don't want to miss out on your beautiful future. Let's start anew, together.
Faced with John's heartfelt confession, Emily's expression showed hesitation. She looked at the ring, its brilliance almost blinding. John was right. She had lived in pain for so long, and now that her revenge was complete, she should start anew. And John was such an excellent, wonderful man. Maybe she should try to see if they could make it work. Emily swallowed hard, tightly pressed her lips together, and finally nodded vigorously. As she nodded, a sense of unease bubbled up inside her, and an image of a certain man's face flashed uncontrollably in her mind.
Madam, you can't agree to this.
A man ran over, panting heavily.
Michael? She hadn't seen him since the company went bankrupt.
Madam, you can't marry someone else. Do you know what James has done for you in secret?
What has he done? He gave me the gift of a ruined family.
Madam, you've misunderstood James. The contract termination back then wasn't sent by James. It was Sarah who set him up, tricking him into going to the US and then hiring someone to send the contract to your family.
So what? Even if it was a setup, the signature on that contract was James's. I could recognize his handwriting even if I were blind.
James, madam, you just don't understand.
Michael pushed a set of documents in front of her.
Look, this is the company James established for you. In the face of bankruptcy, he didn't take any measures to save his own company but instead diverted all available funds to create a company for you.
Emily picked up the documents. It was a company named Wish, with her name listed as the legal representative.
Wish? Could it be the building he showed me that day?
James said your designs were so excellent that you deserved your own company.
Does he think a broken building can erase all the past grievances? He's delusional. Go back and tell James that he can never repay the debt of my parents' lives.
Emily angrily threw the documents to the ground and shouted. She could still imagine the tragic way her parents had died.
Your parents weren't killed by James. It was Sarah who hired someone to run them over. That's why James has been imprisoning and tormenting Sarah all these years, making her pay for her sins.
Emily's mind suddenly exploded with a loud noise.
What did you say? My parents were killed by Sarah?
Emily, agitated, grabbed Michael so tightly that he could hardly breathe. Her mortal enemy was actually Sarah.
Sarah! I want her gone. I want her gone. Emily ran like a madwoman.
Emily! John grabbed her.
I'm sorry, John, I can't agree to marry you. She forcefully pried John's hand away, took off the ring, and placed it back in his palm.
John watched her figure gradually disappear into the distance, his eyes filled with sorrow.
Madam, it's the president.
Someone pointed to a figure across the street and shouted. Emily ran towards it, desperate to uncover the truth about her family's past. At that moment, a car sped towards her.
Creech.
Brakes, a door opening, and someone yanked Emily into the car.
Emily? Emily?
Two men shouted in alarm. They dashed into the street, trying to block the car. But the car didn't stop, brutally knocking one of them down.
James! Emily screamed in shock.
Lap.
A heavy slap left her dizzy.
Shut up. Let's see how you scream later. A woman with a vicious look warned her harshly.
You? Sarah? You wretched woman who ruined my family. I'll make you pay.
Hut.
A blow to the head made the agitated Emily gradually lose consciousness.
I'd like to see how you'll make me pay. Sarah stomped on Emily's hand, her eyes filled with malice.
Quick! Call the police! James shouted from the car roof.
John watched the man clinging to the car roof with a complex expression. He had lost. Due to the car's high speed, the man was eventually thrown off. James hit the ground hard, trying to keep his eyes open, but ultimately lost consciousness. The car drove to a desolate area. Sarah dragged Emily out by her hair, throwing her to the ground. Emily's head hit a corner, and blood immediately flowed.
Don't worry, I won't let you off so easily.
Sarah sneered at the furious Emily. 3 days passed like this. Emily was tied up in a dark room.
Rack.
The door opened, and blinding light suddenly poured in, making it hard for her to see.
Sarah dragged her out of the room, leading her up a mountain path.
Where are you taking me?
To watch a show, a grand show.
Emily was forced to stand at the edge of a cliff, a gun pressed to her back.
Someone as sinful as you should die here.
Emily glared at Sarah.
We'll see who dies. Look, the main event is here. She looked in the direction of the voice and saw a figure in white approaching.
I'm here.
Then come and get your beloved, she said, gripping Emily's neck with a cold smile.
James slowly approached.
Don't come any closer. She has a gun.
The words and the loud gunshot rang out simultaneously, and a bullet pierced James's abdomen, staining his white shirt with blood. But James continued to move forward, as if nothing had happened.
No! Don't come any closer! The sight of blood making her heart race.
She realized how important he still was to her, how that had never changed. She was truly afraid. Afraid he would die.
Don't be afraid. I'm here, blood pouring from his mouth, his shirt completely soaked in red.
Ha ha ha. How touching. Let's see how long your love lasts. Driven mad by jealousy, Sarah fired another shot at the man. This time, he fell.
Terrified, no. Don't shoot. Don't hurt him. Please.
Seconds ticked by, but the man lying on the ground remained motionless.
Maniacal, James, ha ha ha. You deserved this. Betraying me. Betraying me. Ha ha ha.
At that moment, the man in the pool of red moved. He struggled to get up, gasping for breath.
Serious, let her go.
Vicious, let her go? Sure. Then you can wait for her in the afterlife.
Sarah tightened her grip on the weapon, aiming it at James's head.
Desperate, no. James. I don't need you to save me.
Painful, I don't need you to join me in the afterlife either.
With that, James suddenly charged forward.
Shouting, no.
Sarah's eyes hardened as she pulled the trigger. In that critical moment, Emily broke free from her restraints and pushed Sarah forcefully. Bang! Both figures tumbled off the cliff. James landed on the ground, grabbing Emily's hand. Crimson liquid flowed from his hand to hers, staining her entire arm in mere seconds.
Crying, let go.
Her eyes, filled with despair, were also stubborn, making James's heart ache.
Painful, I won't let go. I can't live without you.
At that moment, her leg was suddenly grabbed.
Crazed, even in death, I want Emily to accompany me. Ha ha ha.
Painful, ah. Let go.
Bang! A gunshot rang out, and a bullet pierced Sarah's head. Sarah, shocked, finally fell off the cliff.
Gritting teeth, don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you.
James used all his strength to pull Emily up. A wave of intense pain hit him, and James lost consciousness, the sound of his name being called growing fainter and fainter until it disappeared.
Desperate, James? James! Don't scare me.
Slowly, the man's body grew colder. She trembled as she reached for his nose, but there was no breath.
Crying, don't leave me. James. I'm back. I'll never leave you again. Come back.
Emily held the man tightly, crying out to the sky. Her cries filled the entire mountain with sorrow, turning the horizon red. The setting sun cast a melancholic glow on them. 3 months later, after that day, he was in the hospital for half a month, with his condition critical several times. The doctors said an ordinary person wouldn't have survived, but he pulled through with sheer willpower. He was in a coma for 2 months, but his first words upon waking were unforgettable for Emily.
Hopeful, I'm back. I want to love you. Marry me.
After such a long recovery, today was their originally planned wedding day, leading to today's grand ceremony that captivated the entire city.
Cheerful. Now the bride and groom, please answer the following question. In a household, there can't be 2 heads. Who will be the head of the household? The one who will be in charge, please step forward.
The entire venue fell silent. She stood still, not moving an inch. Everyone began to murmur. At that moment, James took a big step back. The entire city was shocked, their mouths agape. Was this the same cold and formidable James? This action made Emily burst into laughter, and the next second, her mouth was sealed with a kiss. The kiss was filled with joy, and she responded passionately. The entire city erupted in deafening cheers and applause.